So first item is to approve the minutes of the last meeting. I just look at them since I wasn't here, so if everybody's okay with them, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Peter, over to you for the financial update.
Yes, today we have the March 31st financials in front of us, and if we look at the water, we've sold 73.3% of what we anticipated selling. We've collected 77% of the money, which is right around where we were last year. And as we may remember last year, we really didn't collect enough money through the sale of water to pay for the amount of money that was appropriated at town meeting to run the program. So even though we had the rate increase, we're coming very close at the end of the year. We're back in the same situation we are. I've gone ahead, because today's May 1st, I was able to look at April's cash receipts and see where we are with April's cash receipts. And with April's, we're a little bit better, but we're going to, in order to balance the budget, we've got other things that don't show up on here, like we have backflow testing and we sell meters and the liens. And based on the money that we've historically taken in May and June with these other places we bill stuff, it looks like we will just make the amount of money that we need to pay for the plan that was appropriated at town meeting. But my concern is that we made this year, but sales continue to go down, and therefore, even though we plan the rates based on a three-year average of historical sales, the water conservation program, it's still cooler. Here we are in spring, and we're already into the conservation period, and no one's really even watered because it still feels like winter at my house. I don't know about anybody else's.
It hasn't stopped raining either.
Yeah, and that's good on one hand because we need to water the plant, but you're correct that, we preach conservation, but at the same time we have to have a certain amount of sales to be able to pay for the program that needs to continue so that we can have reliable service here in town. And sales continue to decrease, and that's why I have the concern that we're just barely going to make the collect amount of money that we need to run the program.
So if I remember correctly, last year we went to town meeting for 400 or 800?
250.
250. 250.
So we transferred 250 from retained earnings to that. This year, if we balance all the accounts, the salaries with other expense, we're going to do a balancing between those two. We believe we're going to be okay on revenues. We're just going to make it.
Yeah.
We won't need a transfer from retained earnings, but like Peter says, we're just making it on the water side.
And we had the problems with the things at the filtration plant.
Right.
So I know we've been working with Aaron and Jason to make sure that our expenditures are kept to a minimum because we had unanticipated things happen during the course of the year. So,
VFD.
Losing the 2 VFD drives within the same week, that was a big unexpected cost. And then at that time we had to buy water from Beverly for about 50 hours during that time.
Okay.
Getting the VFDs in, reinstalled, and back up and running. So that's a cost, obviously. And then we have been doing maintenance to well 1, which we were expecting to do the maintenance, but we had to do a little bit more maintenance than expected. So both of those I'm trying to balance through salary and wages with Peter, because we have salary and wages available that we can balance out the operating budget with, and that's the goal.
and again, on the money collected to pay for it, whether it be salaries and wages and other expense, where I fully believe we're going to make it, but we're barely going to make it. We're not. Last year, I think when we were setting the rates, we were talking about we were planning to have a long-term capital plan. We were hoping that sales would be higher. We would be able to build retained earnings a little higher so that we could pay for some of those, build up a reservoir, and then not have to raise the rates to do things that need to be done or raise a lot of debt. But, so, from a financial point of view, we feel we're gonna make it barely. We're gonna work within salaries and wages and other expense to have that balance there, but, a challenging year from a financial standpoint.
On the sewer side, Pete.
On the suicide, we're okay. Where we were last year, if I add in April, we're up in the 90%, where we're going to, where we need to be. So the suicide is working out as we anticipated. And that, to me, just goes to show the sewer, we have 80% of the water is what we anticipate selling the sewer. The sewer is, in fact, remaining stable. We get what we expect. So the conservation, people not watering, to me, that seems to be the message, and that's why we struggle on the water side, and we're all set on the sewer side.
So is this pattern on the, just out of curiosity, gonna ask a lot of curiosity questions, so this water conservation side, do you guys, if you continue to run 10 to 17% off your predictions, this is gonna become the new norm, if you will,
So,
in your models?
well, we're gonna we're gonna talk about it in item 4. We're gonna kick off the rate discussion for next year, and the first big part of that discussion is gonna be looking at how are we gonna predict sales in gallons, not money, but gallons, and it's time to do it differently than how we have been doing it.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, you're on a trend, and, yeah, okay.
Yes.
He's kind of giving you the intro, the trailer
Okay.
to the trend.
And we didn't rehearse it. I haven't talked to him in a month.
No, you're right on track, Cole. Yeah, it's coming.
All right.
Right.
Nice little picture.
Here's the graph right there.
We got the sheet with the numbers, but I think this graph.
You just heard the trailer, there's the movie.
You know,
3-year averages might have changed.
yeah, I think we can see pretty clearly that we have to be a little more aggressive, meaning we have to believe that we're going to sell less than we've sold in the past.
Jason, any questions on the financials? No. Okay. If there's no questions on the financials, motion to vote on them as presented? All in favor? Motion?
A motion.
Okay.
Second.
Approved. Second approved, thank you.
Gets confusing with this.
Yeah, well, there's only 2 of us.
We need the chairman.
I know.
We're lost without.
We're struggling through.
Yeah, we'll make it.
If I can just start with a couple things. So, oh wait, we got the deferral. Want to do that first, Pete?
Yes, it's the next item, yeah.
Yeah. So we have one deferral application for deferral this is the one for seniors 65 and older they qualify under Massachusetts Chapter 41A tax deferral, and this is for the applicant's Carol Lindsay down on Poplar Street, and it's been through staff to check out if this person qualifies, and we will get our money eventually, but we believe in this program and would approve granting it.
Okay.
So we need a vote and then you guys to sign it.
Okay. Motion to accept the deferral as presented to us.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
I've already passed it.
Sure.
Sorry. No problem.
So, thank you. So just to refresh the process here for you guys, so what we'd like to do is have the new rate set, which would take place on July 1st. The rate increase would be on July 1st. Hopefully we can meet and come to a decision on that before that time. That'd be our goal. so we wanted to have an introductory discussion about it tonight,
Okay.
and then we would have schedule another meeting to talk about it further. In past years, what we've done is the second meeting and a hearing on the same night.
Yeah, I
We
know
haven't
that's what
always
it's
been
like.
able to come to a decision on that, but most times we can come to a decision on, on that same night at the end of the hearing. We close the hearing and make a decision on it. That would be the goal. If we can't at the hearing and we need to get more data or do things, we can defer it and, for whatever needs. We want to make a good decision. I wanted to pass out, this is the list of the articles for town meeting that we proposed for town meeting that are gonna have to be funded. So we have our normal operating budgets, which are up a couple percent. And then on top of that, we have the system improvements, and we really feel we've whittled this list down to a must-do list. So if I start at the top, on the water side, so the ones coming out of the water retained earnings is the $205,000 that we need to go to finish to do the chlorine booster station, which is going up by Foley Hill. Everyone's waiting for a long time for that. Number two is one of the more unexpected thing is the carbon filter rehabilitation up at the water treatment plant. So we have two of the carbon filters that we need to renovate the flights. They're breaking, we're repairing them as they go now, but we need to put new flights in both of those carbon filters. Everybody that's looked at it so far, engineers and contractors, are giving us a number of $600,000 per filter to fix these. We're surprised at that. We thought it was going to be half of that. But again, we don't have a design, don't have a bid. We're going to put this, we're going to get a good design and put it out to bid and see what it is. But right now, every estimate for us, we need to plan on spending $600,000 per filter. So that's one $600,000 filter this year, one next year. So those are the two things that would hit the water retained earnings. And then we have the water main replacement program that we talked about, the multi-year. So that one, we would be borrowing money for water main replacements during fiscal year 20. However, the big debt for that is really going to hit in 2021, a year from now. So we really need to plan on that debt payment hitting when we set the rate. We need to plan on that, what's going to happen in 2021. We're going to have an increase in our debt costs. So we want to plan on that. The last thing, the public water source supply, that's looking for the new well down at the Rebecca Nurse property, and we can pay for that out of the lump funds. So that won't affect water retained earnings. But just spending $805 out of water retained earnings takes us down to about $840,000, which is below where we want to be. I think it's eight and some percent.
It's in that vicinity.
It's like between 8.5, where we want to be 10% of our revenue. So, with this year's budget, if we propose spending 800, this 805 out of retained earnings, we really want to think about all together here setting a rate so that we can get our retained earnings back this year, get them back to that policy level. Get us back above the 10, at the 10%. We don't need to be above the 10, but at least get us to the 10%, because we know it's going to be harder to do that next year if we have the debt payments coming. So,
what is that value?
Of what?
The 10% value that you're talking about?
It's 10% of gross revenues, right, Pete?
I think so, yeah.
10% of gross revenues is the policy.
Mhm.
And gross revenue was what this past year?
It's like right around $1 million, right around $10 million.
10, right.
Okay.
So we're talking $1 million.
$1 million, right?
And right now we have how much in there?
About 1.5, a little more than 1.5, close to between 1.5 and 1.6 mark.
So 805, that's from the warrant articles. That's over and above the operating costs. So you're going to be left with $700,000 or $800,000
840, right?
840.
Yep.
So 840, it's just $160,000 difference from the million that
Mhm.
your policy states. So that's the increase that you'd be looking for, right?
Correct. Well, that's, we want to consider getting
No, I just want to
all or part of that 160, yeah.
I just want to clarify in my own mind because
Yep.
this is convoluted a little bit.
Yep, that's right, yeah, that's right on track.
It'd actually probably be a little bit lower if you're expecting revenues to go down, right? Gross, in a sense.
Right, if
Well,
gross
well,
revenues go down, then our
right.
10% number goes down,
That's
yeah.
all.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's all-
Yeah, you're
it's
right.
all- it's
Justin's
all-
right.
There you go. So now we're
But
down
it's
to
not,
900,000.
not drastically. It's
Yeah,
like-
no, but if, right, if we get if we're under $1 million in gross revenues, right?
Right, and then it becomes, okay, so as Dave just stated, we're gonna do one of these carbon things this year and one next year.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we planning to pay for it? Are we planning to borrow that? So, I mean, you know, if we're planning to have the money and maybe pay for it part next year, part this year, do we need to decide, we're gonna take some part of that, 400,000, and try to raise it through the rates this year, and have the rates pay for the other part of it next year? I mean, because we can't just say we want to keep borrowing stuff and stack debt on top of debt. So we have some big decisions ahead of us, and unfortunately, all these things are very expensive.
Right.
Is there any savings to doing those carbon things at the same time in the bid, or do you have to do them each year?
It'd be most likely be minimal, you just talk, maybe you'd probably save on mobilization costs.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm just curious again.
it's a brand, it's typical parts,
Okay.
so I would think if, other than, you'd save a little bit, because you have to mobilize twice.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think it'd be
Yeah,
substantial
Not gonna be
savings.
substantial, okay.
If I may just make a comment, visiting the plant this morning, you're absolutely right, David, that the 600,000 looks unreasonable on paper because it's the framing that separates the charcoal and the filters.
Yep, it's not complicated.
And it's probably going to end up, but it's a big tank. That's the difference.
Yeah, it's 50, yeah.
So you may come out with a much lower price if when the technology advances, but it's one vendor that we are using.
Well, it'll,
Cannot be bid against.
no, it'll be public bid.
Public bid.
So we have quotes from 2 different vendors, but it's gonna be publicly bid. There's multiple vendors that can bid on this. It's not proprietary at all.
So
We're gonna make sure it's not
They'll
proprietary.
buy the parts.
We're gonna review all options on that.
that may be an option, but it's a very simple system.
Mhm.
But the thing is, $600,000 is a lot, but that's required, I guess.
So on the sewer side, the items where we ended up is, just to review quickly, the 2 action plans on the dams that we need to do for 10,000. The SCADA system, this is changing the SCADA controls in the plants. This is great. The 76,000 replaced a number that was like 276 at one time. So we've come up with some good technology that's inexpensive to do that. The pumping stations at 200,000, that's doing repairs to a number of pump stations, trying to push off any big rehabilitation on them, but yet it's items that are bigger than the operating budget. So we're fixing parts and pieces in those stations, doing some work on them, but not a full-blown rehab. And we're extending the life of them. Number 4 is West Street. I don't know if you guys remember, we talked about that West Street force main. That's just the piece on West Street that goes from the pump station up to Dayton. We've had two, is it 2 or 3? It's what?
Over the years, 3.
So we've got 3 breaks in that piece of force main right there. It's right next to the Ipswich River. Obviously, it's in poor soils. We're a little disappointed how it was installed by the contractor, by the developer. So we need to replace that with a cast iron force main from the pump station just up to Dayton Street. And then the last one, number 5, the 475. This right here, that's really a placeholder number. So what we've done is we've put out to bid the same exact bid that we had last year for the Canal Street building. So we put it out to, and we had bids right around $1 million to do that building. They were under the budget. So now we rejected all the bids. We postponed it. We have a number from the architect and engineer that said the escalation is going to be like 60%. We can't believe that. So we just think that's crazy. So we've put out the same bid. We're hoping that it comes in very close to what last year's number was. We know we've spent a little bit of money to put it back out, but that's tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. So we're hoping this comes in more, a couple $100,000 higher than last year. You know, it's probably going to come in higher, but we're actively shopping that around. We're going to have numbers on this before town meeting,
Yes.
right? So you don't
When
know
are
the
the
opening
bids
date
due?
is?
Yeah,
May 9th.
May 9th,
So May 9th,
next week.
we're going to open bids on this. So,
I'm sorry, no,
no?
it's not May 9th. I think no, it is May 9th. It's
May 9th?
It's
Okay.
May 9th. We're opening the sub bids tomorrow.
Okay.
Sub bids get open tomorrow.
Well, good. So we're going to
The
start.
addendum will go out.
So we'll be able to compare the sub bids to last year's right away. Do that and do it, and we'll see. So we're just hoping for the best on this number. The 475 is a placeholder. That's actually the maximum we can spend and still stay within our policy on the retained earnings. So we don't want to spend 475. If the building came in at above that, we just don't think we're getting competitive prices. And if it comes in at 475 more than last year, we don't think we're getting competitive prices, and we'll think about that, before we went and awarded that.
What does this building mean for the existing building that we have that we're at overcapacity on? Isn't this replace the overflow?
So you see, so Aaron, his one of his meter techs, his guys, they're kind of in a renovated garage. That's where their offices are.
Yeah.
And then the crew actually is sharing true temporary trailers over there. So it's going to create a good crew area with a locker room with adequate facilities they can clean up at the end of the day. It's going to provide offices for Aaron and his staff, and it's going to provide a place for the public to come in and look at our records and such. So it's a single-story administration building.
Okay.
Colin? I have, and I raised this already this morning, is you just said that this was exactly the same scope as we had before, this bid. So no new scope has been included in that at all. Because that's what I was, $475,000 seems like, 50, 60% increase. How did you guys come up with that number?
It's from the engineer's estimate.
Oh, God, the engineers. You better get some new engineers. But, 475 seems to be an awful high number.
We agree.
And hopefully you don't have to use only a portion of it instead of the 475.
Right.
Because that whole garage, that whole complex down there now with the new office building, that's a creation of the town manager imposing the dirt into that area, the contaminated dirt over the last year. Now, why should the water and sewer people be paying for that? That was a political decision that the town manager made, and he stopped you from building your building, which was on budget and on schedule, and now all of a sudden we have a $500,000 increase that you may get. Who knows? So that's my concern, because we went through the scope in the past. There's been a lot of decisions made, and you guys cooperated very well. You streamlined it, but now I'll tell you why I'm even asking the question, because 475 seems to be very suspicious number, because it's half of the cost of the building that you're going to put up.
Yep.
So maybe you'll surprise us on May 9th, and I'll be looking for that. If you can, make that happen, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, you're not going to know until you open the bids. And,
We're not going to know to open the bids.
Well, no, but that's right.
Right, and then, you may end up doing what you did put it back out to bid again, right?
Right.
You don't know what you don't know until you know it.
And Mark's right, we did, if you recall, we had it, we had over budget once, we scaled it back,
Oh,
did some
yeah.
value engineering. We didn't put any of those things back in. And the building is still bid, remember we bid 2 different sizes, size A, size B, it's being bid just like that again, same thing.
All right, being a suspicious soul, that's the first thing I suspected.
Oh, yeah, yeah, we knew.
It wasn't your fault, but it was just the consequences.
Well, the goal was to get the original.
Oh, yeah, we
size.
thought we were gonna be able to get the bigger one, but
So,
who knows?
so-
Not if it's this much more money, we're not gonna get it.
There are no options on it, are there?
The bid that was awarded.
The option is the size. We have option the small size and the larger size, just like we did before. Exactly like we did
There's no
before.
difference in the
And is
bid.
there one other option?
No.
Okay, that's the only
There's no
one?
difference in the
Okay.
bid.
Do
The
we,
bid that,
oh, sorry.
the bid that was, that was going to be awarded the last time was the
Small
smaller
one.
building.
Right.
The goal this time was to get the building that we wanted originally.
Yeah.
That was the goal.
Well, that's an increase in scope then.
No, but it's still the same bid.
But it's still an increase in scope, and that's what raised the issue right away, because, you know, what was the price? Do we have the numbers for the original bids that were
It's just over $1 million.
$1 million? That was for the small building.
Yep.
So now we're asking for bids for both sizes?
Yep,
Just like the last time.
just like the last time.
No different.
Okay. Stay tuned, right?
Yep. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
So right now with, like I said, we hope not to spend the whole 475, but even if we spend 874 out of sewer retainers, we still stay within our policy.
Is it 10% as well on that?
Yeah, 10%, yep. The last one, item 6, the Frostish Brook, that's phases 2 and 3. That'd be a borrowing, so we need to plan on some debt service there next year. We do have some declining debt service there on the sewer side too, which will help us out next year.
So just for location purposes, where are those 2 phases?
So we
I'm
went.
very familiar with that.
Yeah, so last year we went from down at the at Poplar Street.
Yeah.
We went up to the Mass Ave culvert by Coolidge,
Yeah,
right there. Now we're going to go from there
yeah,
up past the high school
yeah.
and go all the way. It's not Wellesley. What's the road we end up at? It's Dartmouth. No.
Trent.
Dartmouth is one, yeah.
We go past Dartmouth, past Trinity.
Yeah.
It's up.
Colby backs to the woods, right?
Yeah,
So you're going up
Princeton is down there too.
yeah, but hold
It's
on.
not Princeton.
It's.
No?
Let me get that for you guys. I had that on the tip of my tongue. I forget.
Are they hitting the culverts under the fields there?
So we're not on the culverts under the field. They're not part of this cleaning. We're not doing it.
Okay.
But what we are doing is we're doing an inspection of those culverts
Yeah.
through our sewer inspection program. We're actually going to send a guy through there and do a videotape of it, or I guess it's a big robot going through. So we are going to do an inspection of those culverts and see what they look like and see, you know, are we going to have to plan for relining of those at some point or what's going to happen.
And without doing this, I mean, do we get backups? Is that the issue? Like, or
So hold on. And with this, so in the Frostish Brook,
Goes up to Cabot.
it goes past Cabot.
Yep. It goes up to Cabot, and then goes on the high school, comes back out. Goes
Dartmouth.
Past, goes past
It ends at Dartmouth.
Auburn,
Yeah.
Auburn, yeah.
crosses Dartmouth.
At the culvert located on Dartmouth.
Yeah, I know where we are. Okay, gotcha.
So just what the stream, because it was relocated when they built Woodvale,
Mhm.
it was redirected, so it goes through the neighborhood. Actually, has 90-degree turns in it.
Yeah.
You know, didn't have any armoring on the slopes. It just had regular kind of steep slopes on the side.
Yeah.
So we've cleaned the vegetation a couple times through the years. However, the slopes are eroding into people's yards. The vegetation is clogging up the brook, so that now when we do have storms, it backs up into people's yards.
Okay.
So this will clean it out, get it back to capacity, and we're putting armor stone on the corners so that the corners stop eroding.
Is that all gonna be done this year?
So we get all the way to Dartmouth with this money right here.
I
That's-
think
that's
people
what
are
it's
looking forward to that.
Is that
agree.
phase 2 and 3, Dave?
Correct.
It's supposed to be 2 and 3, right?
Okay.
So this is just to let you know basis money wise, and then as far as the rate analysis, the first thing that we wanted to talk about was to set a number of talk about how we're going to predict how many gallons we're going to sell next year. And I guess Pete, you could take it off with that.
Yeah, in the past, we've used a 3-year average of the prior 3 years, and we've averaged that out, and we've said, that'll take into account the fluctuations in sales. Unfortunately, though, what's happened over the years now is, as we can see in this graph, the sales have continued to go down. And I believe because we've been using a 3-year average, we can see that we were at the higher years, and each year, due to weather, conservation, we've sold less and less. So using the 3-year average gives us a false indication of how much we're going to sell. So this particular year, it would be my suggestion that we use what we've sold in the fiscal year 19. Because again, it's gone down. I've got this chart which, well, here's the graph. Let me give you the numbers. This is the numerical values, month by month that I arrived at that with. But I think the graph is easier for everybody. I know it's easier for me to look at than it is to look at all these numbers. So given that sales have continued down, I feel that the last 2 years have been a struggle to collect the amount of money that we needed. As we mentioned earlier, last year we had to have a transfer at town meeting from retained earnings to make the number. I think it would just be a more reasonable and accurate approach to use what we sold in 2019. And if we look at the chart, Mr. Chairman, here with all the sales, we can see that those two last numbers that are in red in 2019, the 8.1 million on the 2019 column here.
Sure. Yep.
Those two numbers there in the red, those are the estimated numbers that we had last year based on the 3-year average that we used last year. We haven't hit any of the numbers that came through for the average. And so even if I use that number, by May we'll have, by the time we have the rate hearing, we'll probably have May. We'll have May, and we'll just have one estimated month.
So for the first time, we're recommending
Past year.
using the past year's number, and we've never, but if we just use any kind of average, we just don't feel, we're depending on Mother Nature. If we had if the weather conditions were just right and everyone watered like crazy at the right time, we could sell a whole bunch of water, but we don't think we're really in the business of predicting that. And if that comes, then great, that'll help retain earnings.
That's correct, and it would help the rates for the next year.
It'll help the rates for the next year.
But
We don't believe we can plan on that.
in order to be able to meet the goals of the division, we feel that would be prudent. Which, like I say, is a little bit different.
I'm going to be curious now. I'm just looking at this. I don't think I've ever seen this far back, but it seems like there's a couple really big hiccups that happened in the process. Like July of 2011 was up about like $8-9 grand over most years, and then we see June of 12, and then July and August of 13. Was there some? Accounting things?
No, it's all lawn watering.
$50 million.
Lawn, yeah.
It's all lawn watering.
That's cubic feet, those aren't dollars.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's cubic feet, yeah.
That's right. That wouldn't make sense. The dollars wouldn't have made sense.
Yeah,
cubic feet.
But
in the same, it translates to dollars.
Yeah, take a zero off.
So
Take 2 zeros off. And it's
how can you have
here,
negative 50 million cubic feet
Yeah,
we give back? What it would-
no,
for
no,
personal
no, no,
floods?
no. One must remember that in between 11 and 12,
Yeah.
we had, that was the transition from.
Well, that's when with the new meters.
New meters,
Oh.
meter readers were doing the
Oh,
readings.
okay.
We had the meters taken out, and as they were taking them out, as everyone may recall, our meter installers were getting an actual read, given today lifestyles that people have. There were a
So
lot of
October of
houses.
12 is when we got that could have been when we got the new
Yeah.
meter reads.
Yes, depending upon, some people's meters were estimated high, some were low.
Okay.
So, yes, I give this information all the way back, but if we look at the graph, even 11, in preparation for the mass meter installation,
Sure.
we made
I remember that.
we had.
Concerted effort.
Yeah, to get into people's houses. We had people going on Saturdays and stuff to help prevent the shock of getting, somebody.
actual readings.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we worked at that during that time. So there are some anomalies in here,
Okay.
but I think for purposes of the trend, we can still see that
Yeah.
we're going down.
Oh, no, I
And
agree.
How soon we forget how much harder our jobs were. We used to deal with those estimated readings and just a quarterly reading, and if we missed the quarter, we'd have like 6 months of estimated readings.
yeah, and then when we had I never had some of the customer concerns when I never had a leak in my irrigation system. It would become a math problem, but now we have different types of discussions around
But they're a lot
that.
easier.
But yes, but anyway,
But that was in late 12, early 2013 is when the meters were
that's correct.
installed.
So the 2019 number on the graph, is that annualized?
Yes,
That-
with
yes.
2 estimated months.
Yes, we've got actual usage,
Yeah.
except for the last 2 months, May and June, which is a 3-year average.
But they're in that block, right?
That's correct. So that's
That's
an
annualized.
estimate.
All right, so help me out for a second, my math brain's going at it. So this looks way more than a 5% drop to me then, right? On the graph, so this is 130 over 136, right?
Yeah.
The scale is off.
We're dropping like 2.5 each year.
It could be the scale of the graph. Like
Oh, yeah, yeah,
but
I just-
you
Yeah, I was just.
Oh, no, I see what you, no, that's not percent right.
But, those
That's a
are,
5% drop, right?
Yeah, so, let's see, so,
So 19, right? I
for
was just
16,
doing-
yeah.
Right.
So if we used a 3-year average,
Mhm.
wouldn't the number be just slightly over the 130? I mean, if you use the 3-year average, I mean, you're talking 133 to 130 over 3 years. So the 3-year average is
That's 5%.
falling the same place.
That looks like more. Yeah,
It does, the
scale.
graph, the scale is off, right?
Yeah.
I'm not, well, Mark, if we take 2 higher years and we average them out, yeah, it's gonna lower it down, but my point is, the last 2 years, the sales have dropped, and therefore we're anticipating, we're setting rates based on sales that at this stage of the game, due to conservation, I do not believe we're gonna make.
Yeah, I agree, I was just trying to understand that.
Yeah, like I say, yeah, just
Right.
answering that question. I mean,
3 years is very close to what it is right now with the 19.
Would be like close, it would be more than you had last year, it would be over 131,
Yeah, but,
so,
um,
yeah. I mean, if that's, it seems like it's a trend, I mean, we're a couple spikes, then it was pretty generally level,
Level, right.
with then a uptick and then.
you know, we had
Conservation
we had,
efforts
we,
probably.
well, we had one warm summer. Last year really wasn't
was very-
warm. The spring was like this, where it was cool and rainy, and, it was a better summer than the year before, but it was by no means, what a lot of people would consider summer weather, where they were, watering their lawns.
So,
So does anybody in your profession have predictive analytics? In terms of, I'm just trying to think of, the variables that are going into this, there's usage, and then what's the rain, and what's the temperature? Has anybody looked at modeling this out to help you guys out with your estimates?
let me check on that. Because I'm wondering if our modeling software has a module that would do that. But whether, I don't know. I want to ask. We do it on the electric side. So I have predictive modeling for next year. I have for the next 5 years. Actually, I have for the next 10. But that's good. I have predictive modeling for the electric side, just because we have to use that to buy power contracts. We have to like plan on where we're buying, what we're going to be buying. I'm buying contracts that are 5 years long, which I'd be buying out. So we have it on the electric side. I've never asked if we have it on the water side, but I can.
Either that, or I'd love to hand this off to some graduate student in MIT and say, help us with the math
Well,
problem.
right away,
Probability, yeah.
the two things is to take these years and you put inches of rain
And the heat-
and degree days.
Yeah, the heat index, right?
It's called degree days. But the big thing is when they come. That's then if you really want to tweak it is like a really warm February doesn't help us, but a really warm June does.
Right, yeah, but a database with that, a lot of that historical information would help you.
Right. That's the two things and we'd have to put like population on here, population growth, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
But-
a nice dry May, a nice warm dry May is what we need.
Oh, yeah.
We're not anywhere near there yet. So.
right, yeah, we need May to dry out in a hurry here, Pete.
We'll call the man upstairs.
It didn't happen last year when we had this discussion. We were in the same.
We'll give Mother Nature
we were
a
in the
call.
same boat.
Long-term forecast looks no different.
It's a tough problem. It's a tough business to try
Let's
and.
kill it.
Yeah,
And on the other hand,
Trying to run a business model.
yeah, that's.
we preach and encourage conservation, which
Hit your revenue.
correct.
I got it.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece, and so you can kind of see where we'll come at,
Yeah.
for the numbers. Then the second piece of the rate design will be how much revenue do we want to generate in total? And I think our recommendation, we'll have a couple options we'll present to you guys, but the first one on the water side, present an option that would get our retained earnings back slightly above our policy. We'll have a couple options. Probably one to get it above the policy, maybe another to put a little bit of money towards those carbon filters next year. We'll look at that, and that's. But we'll have the break. We'll have the break even, the one to do that, the one to get us back to a policy, the one to put some money towards the carbon. We'll be able to show you that in gross dollars. On the sewer side, we'll probably show one to get us above. Make sure we stay above the policy and don't go minus. So that will have a gross number that we'll show you, and there'll be options. And then the tricky part is, how do we get to the gross number? So on our rate, we have 4 components. We have the base rate on the water side, which is that quarterly charge we charge everybody. That's our fixed charge, which the accountants love because we're guaranteed to get our money no matter what happens. Then we have our tier 1, which the accountants love the second best, because if you use a gallon of water, you're in tier 1. You really got to use 0. And then you get tier 2 and 3, which the DEP loves us to put high numbers on those. It encourages water conservation. It actually tries to discourage excess water use, all those things. However, as we've looked at the numbers in the past, the reason we're having trouble with our revenues is because when these numbers dropped, we're losing those tier 2 and tier 3, which is our high revenue money. So it's when we design this year's rate, we need to look at the base rate and tier 1 in order to make sure we're increasing those enough to meet the budget. Everyone loves to say, let's put a big giant increase on tier 3, and then we'll count on getting all that money, and then if no one goes into tier 3, we don't get our money. And then we're back like we were last year at town meeting.
Correct.
So that's, so
Will you present the option that we went with last year as part of that?
Yep.
Please.
present up, yep.
Because I remember doing it, but I don't remember the details of what we
Yeah, we
vote,
had,
so.
I think, four
There was
options.
3 or 4 options on
Three or
both,
four,
yeah.
you know, we had the base rate. We-
Increasing
We
the
did
base
increase
rate.
the base rate last year for both residential and
Yeah.
commercial. The commercial customers pay that base rate 12 times a year. Residents pay it quarterly, 4 times. So, but we did increase both of those, and then we had what we thought would be the average increase to the average customer.
Base rate we have right now, Pete, is what?
Right now, it's $12 for residential and
Per quarter?
per quarter, and $21 per month for commercial.
That's per month per commercial.
That's correct.
And I've got to say, our customers never, they don't like the base rate, they don't like it. You know, on the accountant side, it's great, it's the income you get there. And we do have fixed costs, no matter, if we don't even sell a gallon, we have fixed costs that are there, a lot. So, we'll give you guys some options next time on those fixed, but we need you guys to think about where we can really use some input, some guidance on what do we do with that base rate.
I guess, sorry, another just request, and I don't know if you had this last year, is that to help us in advance of that, I think if we could provide historically maybe what we did over the past
Sure.
X
Yep.
amount of years. Like what
Historical increases? Okay.
increases for everything would probably be helpful.
Okay.
3 or 4 years, yeah.
Yep.
That would be helpful. Coley, can
Last time the base rate went up before last year was 2014.
You know what, people,
Yep.
we'll give them the history of the base rate,
Yep.
and we'll give you the history
Yep.
of the rates.
Of the rate.
That's the rate.
Well, yeah, I did, last time before last year was 2014, just,
Okay.
you know.
All right.
so
For the
you
base
can-
rate.
For the base
Yeah,
rate,
yeah.
that's correct,
That's
just so you
good.
can think about it, but we'll get you that information,
Sure.
absolutely.
And we'll get that out ahead of the meeting, too.
Yeah, if we're gonna have a discussion, I would.
You gotta get it out, we'll
Yeah.
get it out ahead of the meeting. And obviously, you can see, when we see that, you're gonna see our increases like a couple percent, 3,
Yeah.
We had 1 year where we did 0, at least 1 year, there might have been 2. Back when we did the meter change out, it had to be a little more, but on the water side, we're looking for I think there's gonna have to be a bigger increase than we're used to. And we can't take that lightly.
What do you expect?
Somewhere 5 to 10.
How can we justify that? That's the problem from the residential standpoint. I mean, our water, the per gallon rate, let's say, is pretty high for the residential one. However, when you use larger volumes of water, the rate drops down because that's the commercial rate. That's what you're worried about. But I mean, what is this water company here for? Is it for the residents, or is it for a business practice? I mean, we need to consider the residential rate itself. And we're asking our customers to reduce the use, economize, and be environmentally friendly and all that, but we're still pushing the rate up on them. So I'm just concerned for the residentials that are out there, and we're hitting them with taxes, we're hitting them with fees for building permits now, and now water and electric is going to go up. So we need to consider, why are we here? Is it for the residents or is it for the business? And if the business commercials are going to use less water, that really compensates for some of the savings that the residentials have to make. Because, yes, our costs are going to, our revenue is going to be reduced, but we are going to be environmentally friendly using less water. And we have restrictions already, level 2, right now.
Yeah, I think we need to,
That's something that I'm very concerned about.
I'm coming back to the predictive analytics, and I'd be very interested in that. And I think also, as we get into it, what are the fixed costs just to run the physical? We got an aging piping system. We got to take a look at all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's going off in my head, and I need to go think about it some more, is this whole multivariable equation thing that's going on with all the things that go into how to try and run this business. It's, you guys got a tough job on your hands. We do. I guess we're all in this together, but,
Yeah.
we need to think about that. Because I think, I mean, just looking at the graph, and I'm a big believer in a picture that tells 1,000 things, right? Look at the drop-off, and you've never had that kind of drop-off in what you've seen in the last 3 years. At the same time, you're trying to fix an aging system, keep the quality up, blah, 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 blah. That's a tough thing to do, really. You've never seen that in your history, right?
Nope.
So, gotta go look at that. Okay.
And when the customers turn the taps on, they
Yeah.
want water,
Right. But it's almost like you put yourself out of business with the conservation, right?
Yeah.
That's why.
That's what we're doing.
But that's
You-
why.
you put yourself out of business.
Well, that's why we bring up the
Right,
fixed
right.
charge, which we
Right.
brought up last year, because that, you know, there's constant maintenance to the system.
And let's not, as much as, Danvers wants to be, do the right thing and do the right thing that they, as far as concerned, well, we're being forced to conserve to the level we are by the state. The regulations are forcing us
Okay.
through our water management permit, which we're just beginning the next round of that now. So,
Some more to come.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Right.
Cool. Thank you, gentlemen.
Did I
So
do
we'll
all
get
the
that out
agenda?
before that, so we'll,
Back to the agenda. And then, are you guys done with that? Item
Yep.
number 4?
Yep.
Any miscellaneous things that need to be brought?
Yeah, I
up?
have two quick things.
Okay.
One is we talked quickly last time about the PFASs in well 1. Remember that was in the Boston Globe article? And that's the perfluorofluoride. Did you hear about this, Justin? Were you here?
I think so. I was at the last meeting.
You were there, right? So this is the stuff that comes from a variety of things. So right now, it appears that the state is going to change their threshold. It's something that was in their long-range plan, something they've sped this up. And so now what was a number of 75 parts per trillion is going to drop, down to 20 parts per trillion, most likely. It may go to what's called a health advisory at first, but it's heading towards a regulated number. And that 20 is right at the cutoff of what they can even test to, right there. Out at well 1, where we had the hit before that was in the 20s, it was like 23, we've retested that. DEP came out and retested that in the last couple of weeks. We haven't got the results yet. I don't know why, but are they coming soon?
Well, I don't know if they're waiting, they're gonna be testing the north well tomorrow.
Okay, so they tested, at well
Tested
1,
the
we have
south.
a north and a south well. They tested the south well. They are coming to this, no, that's news.
Tomorrow.
Okay. So we gotta get these test results back, do some more testing at well 1. So if they're gonna drop that limit to 20, and we don't, and we're getting hits in we're gonna have an issue with well 1.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to, that is a real unexpected issue with well 1. So,
And that's the only place it shows up.
correct.
So watch the show. Jason did a hell of an explanation on that, because I felt guilty of bringing that up because Boston Globe brought it up and Danvers was mentioned in there.
Yep.
So I made sure that Jason had an opportunity to explain it, and he did an excellent job. So this is a promo for Topics of the Town News.
Good. Excellent. Yeah. So right now, well 1's off. We're
Yeah.
not using well 1. We're doing the testing on it. We're going to see, and
So tomorrow we'll run the north well.
and get a
It
test
will
sample.
go into the system, it will go into the distribution system, and a sample will be taken, it'll be shut down.
So we'll do that. So that's more to come. Don't know. And
I mean, what is the fix for this? Like,
this,
Is there-
so
Still.
So the
more to come.
treatment process for this, it can be filtered out,
Yeah.
UV treatment for it. We don't know the cost of that yet.
Sure.
We don't even know so theoretically, if you wanted to treat that water, we should pump it over to where well 2 is and run it through that treatment plant.
Yeah.
And maybe, and that treatment plant could probably do it, but now we gotta run a pipe over to well 2, so we don't know. And so we gotta look at the, the capacity of well 1. The capacity of well 1 changes depending on how clean the screens are in there. So we're not even, we're not getting 0.8 million gallons a day anymore out of that well. So 600,000 gallons a day, we gotta think, are we gonna be able to get 600,000 gallons a day without putting wells in? A lot of analysis needs to go
Sure.
in.
Okay.
If they're in it. We gotta do a whole, before we put a nickel into that well, we gotta
Yeah.
run the numbers way out and see. So,
Get the results back, see where we are.
other plans. So not great news. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that we're into the Water Management Act renewal process. So that's our 5-year permit, which they just renewed the last one. It was 10 years ago we did it. So it was 10 years ago now. We did all these, the water restriction that went into place today, that was when it came into place, was 10 years ago, part of that permit. The first stage of the permits for us to do in order to complete, we have to answer a whole bunch of questions about the system, a whole bunch of things about water conservation, about demand, population, future growth in Danvers and Middleton. They wanted that back in August. We've asked for an extension. We're going to try to have it back to them around the first of the year. So everything they proposed, obviously they're proposing enhanced conservation. They want us to do more conservation. We believe we're the leader right now. We're doing more than anybody, and we're doing enough. We'll see how that goes. So we're preparing that. We've also started negotiations with Middleton because it's time to redo the contract between Middleton and Danvers. So we've started that discussion. So that'll go in parallel with this order to complete and the Water Management Act permit. So last time the permit, we went through this process, negotiated with them. They gave us a permit, we appealed it right away. Don't be surprised if that doesn't happen again. It's likely the town will appeal the permit.
David, what is the proportion of the water that's generated from the treatment plant that goes to Middleton and goes to Danvers? Is there a split? Is it like 40-60 or 30-70?
Oh yeah, no, it's. I don't have the numbers tonight, but so as far as our daily demand, it's more like an 80-20 split between
80 for Danvers, 20 for Middleton, because
More than
it's
that.
such limited distribution lines there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're a
don't
lot
have
smaller
much.
than us.
Right.
Population-wise.
Population-wise, everything goes small.
They have a lot of wells still too, right?
Yes.
Yep, and they still have some wells. Yep. So, obviously Middleton still has land to grow on.
Yeah.
We need to we've got to account for that. In Danvers, you see, Danvers's growth is this conversion of single-family homes to multi-units, where you've got the single house is becoming 4 to 6 condos. That's where Danvers is seeing its population growth. Because you see, when we do the study, we learned it on the Smith School.
Yeah.
We see the the population's growing. The babies are already born. They're already here, and now now I see this is where they're living. It's a few big. We have a few big apartment complexes that got Conover Hill got developed and Swingaway got developed, and those were big complexes. But now it's this. Units when they're taking one single family home, putting 6 3 or 4 3-bedroom units in, that's a lot of population. That's a lot of growth. So that's where Danvers is seeing its growth right now. So we need to account for that.
Yeah, and well, they're predicting the capacity for the Smith School being almost double what it is now, right?
Yeah. When we went to the MSB, they called us in special because we had a predictive number we thought was pretty high and was good. They called us in and said, "You guys need to redo your numbers," and they were absolutely right. And we were wrong. And they're like, "This isn't even looking at potential growth. Well, the baby's already born. They're already living there."
Yeah. Well, there's not a lot. That's the only way you can grow, I think, in Danvers. There's not a lot of room left.
Yeah, not a lot of room.
No.
Yeah, you're right. All right, so that was the other thing I wanted to mention.
So, you want to take a look at next meeting date?
Yeah.
You probably want to do a couple of them to get them in before the July 1.
Yeah, well,
The double.
Sure. What about Tuesday the 11th, Pete?
Tuesday will work for me.
Or the 18th? The 18th works good too, and then we still have another week to have another meeting if we had to. I think. Oh, okay, I figured it out. Yeah, 18th is good for me. Pete?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with June 18th.
June 18th, 5:30 here.
Yep.
That works, okay.
So what we'll tentatively do is we'll go 5:30 meeting, 6:30 rate hearing. And if we need, and then if you have the option of, you can either set the rate at the end of the rate hearing or continue
set
the rate
another
hearing,
meeting.
continue it till the next week.
Okay. Anything else, Mark? Anything from you?
Yes, I was waiting. Thank you. I just did some rough numbers, and I saw David's calculation here of how much of it is water and how much of it is sewer for the warrant articles I'm talking about. But I took it with a different approach where the $2 million per year, that's going to end up to be, it's not going to be spent in 2020, is it, David?
Say it again? No, we're gonna spend like $2 million a year at the most.
$2 million a year, but it's gonna be debt service after that of
Right.
around $200,000
Yep.
or in that range.
Right.
So what I'm looking at is, yes, the numbers seem to represent a $8.3 million for your operating budget, and another million, roughly, plus or minus, for the warrant articles. And all of that is being funded through the revenue, water revenue. Right now, we're making, what, $10 million in water revenue?
Pete, is that what it is?
Roughly, that's what you just said, not too long ago. What I'm just concerned about is that I think what we're looking for is just the policy that you have established of $1 million as a reserve, which I understand that. But the thing is, I don't understand why, it's 5 to 10% increase. And why is that 5 or 10% increase really going to be borne by the residential rate and not shifted over to the commercial and industrial?
Oh, I guess, so, I just
something that
said a blended number. We get a lot of decisions on how it's gonna, whether it's gonna be
I know
residential,
that.
commercial, how that, we can figure that all out next meeting.
Okay, but I think we should start thinking about that because the residents are really going to get hurt with, 10% increase. That's going to be a lot. I mean, we already got hit with a tax increase. We're going to get hit with an assessment increase for the residential homes again. Electric seems to be holding its own, but it's got too much money hanging around, but that's a different issue. And our permit fees are going up with the warrant articles, because that's another one that's a department that makes more revenue than they actually spend. And this seems like it's the same situation. Sewer is not as bad, but it's very similar. So I don't know. I think we've got to start thinking about what the residents really are going to feel from this rate increase.
I want to look at the numbers.
Say that again?
Yeah, I want to look at the numbers.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
I haven't seen numbers yet.
I know.
Other than tonight. So
But the thing is that we need to start considering the residents, because those are the guys that are paying our bills.
And we're residents too.
I know. We're all
Yeah,
getting
the bill comes to my house, I mean.
I got you.
Yeah.
All right, so
Thank you.
if there's a chance that you guys have your financials before the next meeting, can you get them to us?
Oh, we are.
Yeah,
We're gonna,
okay,
Peter and I are gonna
just
set
making
it,
sure, yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah.
get together and we're gonna set ourselves a deadline to get that out, give you guys a week to look at that.
Okay, great.
We're gonna shoot for a week before the meeting, Pete. You could, right?
Yeah, well.
So, I'll tell you right now,
Just making sure.
we're gonna get it in your hands no less than a week before the meeting.
Okay,
And if you guys have questions,
just give you a buzz.
yeah, give me a buzz or fire an email, and we'll do that. Obviously, we can't, I can answer questions back. We can't meet all three of us without a public meeting, but I can answer
Yeah.
questions back.
But it's all gonna be preliminary anyway at that time.
I'll look at it, yeah.
Yeah.
Town meeting's involved. All right, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?